how COVID-19 has widened the gender super gap. Hello, I'm Diana Messina and I'm a senior economist at AMP Capital. Today I'll be talking with AMP Data Insights Manager Tracy Lewis about the gender super gap. Tracy will tell us about how the economic impact of coronavirus is widening the gap for Australian women's super amounts and what can be done about it. So Tracy, what exactly is the gender super gap?
Thanks, Diana. You've probably heard of the gender pay gap that tracks the average weekly earnings between men and women. Well, the gender super gap monitors the average superannuation balances of men and women and tracks these as they approach retirement age. Australia has one of the best retirement income systems in the world, but sadly not everyone is benefiting from it equally. On average, women retire with $79,000 less in super than men, and 1 in 4 women retire with no super at all.
Can you tell us about some of your latest research into the gender super gap? What did you find?
It's unfortunate, Diana, that we've seen the super gap widen even further this year, following the Australian government's early access to super scheme.
A quick reminder, this scheme was announced earlier in the year in response to the economic impact of the coronavirus. It allowed eligible people to withdraw up to $10,000 between the 20th of April and the 30th of June. Another $10,000 can be withdrawn between the 1st of July and the 31st of December 2020.
Our numbers show that among the people that withdrew money as part of this scheme, the gender super gap widened from 25% before the withdrawal to 29% after it.
Tell us more about why this is happening.
When we looked at the results from the first withdrawal period, we noticed that women, on average, were withdrawing less from their super than men. That sounds positive. However, the withdrawal made up a larger percentage of their starting balance.
What does this mean for Australian women?
Because women typically had a lower starting balance to begin with, by withdrawing money from their super, they were withdrawing a large proportion of what they had accumulated. This means that they'll potentially have much less for their retirement years.
Are there women who are at greater risk of this happening?
Yes, we've seen people working in the recruitment, retail, and hospitality sectors make up almost half of the early release withdrawals. And we know that female employees make up a large portion of the workers in these sectors. Our numbers also show that older people have withdrawn more under this scheme than younger ones.
For women who might have withdrawn money as part of the early super access scheme, what can they do to try and rebuild their super?
There are a few things, Diana. They could think carefully about withdrawing money in the second round of this scheme, particularly if the money will be spent on non-essentials. Some external research has shown that 64% of the funds withdrawn in the first round of the scheme was spent on lifestyle items such as clothing and alcohol. Before withdrawing money from super for bills and other essentials, it's worthwhile exploring options available from home loan and utility providers. Ultimately, if someone still needs to withdraw money from super, they should consider setting up a plan for how they could repay this money back in the future in the form of personal contributions. This will help to rebuild super. And finally, it's so important that all Australians, not just women, are aware that this is happening. The gender super gap has the potential to have a major impact on our financial future, so it's important that we're all part of the solution. I encourage all Australians to start a conversation with the women in their lives to shed some light on this issue.
Thanks, Tracy, for sharing these insights with us. Retirement can often seem like a long time away, but if we're diligent from the outset, then it can make a big difference later on. Let's do a quick recap. The gender super gap tracks the difference in average super amounts between Australian men and women. Following the Australian government's early super access scheme, the gender super gap has widened even further. Early super withdrawals made by women made up a larger percentage of their starting balance compared to men. Anyone who has withdrawn their super early could consider rebuilding their super once they are financially able to. Speaking to family and friends about the gender super gap is one of the first steps towards closing the gap. Please remember that this video hasn't taken your personal circumstances into account. It's important to consider your circumstances before deciding what's right for you.